have an inspiring fire chat for you this afternoon. So we want you just to sit back and just take all of this in. And first, I want to say, thinking bold is one thing, but the follow-up is the difference maker. I think we all can agree on that. You have to be bold and then put some action behind it, right? So for example, delving into your craft and becoming undeniable to the point of starting from the bottom, coming on up until you're there, and then go a little higher, right? And then winning national and international awards, including humanitarian awards and the White House Champion of Change and Transportation Award, and then having led two of the largest transportation authorities in the nation, for example, in Atlanta and San Francisco, and then being asked to sit at the table with representatives from Australia and China and England and France and Russia and Saudi Arabia and South Africa and Sweden, for example. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but to provide your thoughts on transportation policy. Well, Mr. Nathaniel Ford, you've just come back from Washington, D.C., and that's where you spoke to members of Congress on behalf of the American Public Transportation Authority. So can you give us, well, first of all, we want to give honor where honor is due. Can we do that?
Thank you.
Because these are some huge, huge feats. And again, you made yourself undeniable by honing in on your craft, educating yourself in what you just eventually just came to love, and that was transportation. But how did you get to sit before Congress?
Whoa, well, it's because of all of you. And this Jacksonville Transportation Authority that I have the honor of actually leading every day. Yep. That I have the honor of serving in this community and serving with nearly 1,000 or so transportation professionals that really care about this community. And that led to this honor last week where I testified before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on behalf of the entire public transportation operations across the country. So JTA Jacksonville was front and center as the spokesperson, so to speak, talking about the future of our industry across this nation. And it was truly an honor. You guys got me prepared. I mean, we had to prepare for any question that could come, everything from tariffs to, you know what, that's going on at the national level. I had to be prepared for. And I had all of you behind me, and that's why I think I was so successful. Before we go to the next question, though, Dawn, I think your joining the JTA is probably one of the best decisions we've made. And I think that's part of the JTA magic, is that we look for the best and the brightest to work in our organization. We have bold visions right in line with Troy and Mo, and it's just an honor to be on this stage to be part of, I think, what is a movement. For this community, and a movement in terms of feeling that we're first class, we deserve the best, and we are the best, and putting back some of those thoughts of what's good enough is acceptable. And that's going to be part of my, I think, discussion with you today, is that we don't believe that good enough is acceptable for this community and the people who live in it, and that's why we're so bold at the JTA.
It's true. It's true. And that's why I came to the JTA as well, is to tell the story, because some big things are coming. And I wanted to be a part of that. Thank you, because that hit me in my heart.
All right.
Well, you've been involved in and you've been enjoying the whole Think Bold Festival and Conference. What is your idea of living and thinking bold daily?
Yes, I think it's a passion around what you do professionally that ties to improving your community. And I think at least for Nat Ford, in terms of thinking bold, it's really looking at the JTA that I saw, this community, back in 2012 when I joined this community. And often you'll hear me reflect on this story. I was here in Jacksonville, got a chance to get interviewed by a number of people in this community. And one of the lunchtime visits was with some leaders of the chamber, We actually got in some, I guess, a SUV, and we're driving down. I can't remember what particular street, but we were driving down the corridor. And someone who's in my profession, we're looking at the bus stops, we're looking at the buses, we're looking at the passengers, we're looking at all of that because we're sizing up the community also. And to this day, it still burns in my memory. You know, a bus stop, which was essentially a pole in the ground, dirt patch. It had an open drainage ditch right along it. It had a overturned shopping cart. I guess that was supposed to be the bench. And there was an elderly lady that was there leaning up against that bench. And it struck me, and this was probably in like the October timeframe, so it's still kind of warm. And we go to lunch. I go to lunch with these Jacksonville business leaders, and I can't remember the corridor or what street it was, but on the way back, I look, and the lady's still there. I happened to notice that she was still there. And it was just shocking to me that that was acceptable in our community in terms of transportation. Now, we still have a lot more work to do, but I think that is what is part of my driving force, which is how do I use my talent in transportation to provide this community with world-class transportation opportunities. You rattled off all those countries and different systems that I worked with around the country, and this would not be acceptable in those previous places that I've worked. And so it's that type of passion that drives me. That's the type of passion that I use in terms of identifying members of our leadership team, because we care about people, and good enough is not acceptable to us.
That's right. Well,
Yeah. Thank you.
I know that you mentioned talent. We're going to get to the professional talent in just a moment, but I want to take you back.
Yes.
How far back? Way back.
Okay.
I'm talking about like cassette tape back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
You should be nervous. Okay.
Okay.
So I hear you have a lot in common with one of the founders of Think Bold, Troy McNair. Now, he grew up across the river in Jersey. You grew up in New York.
Yes.
During the evolution of the hip hop
Yes.
years, right? All right. You're from NYC. What influence did that have on you coming up? So I hear you were a breakdancer.
No.
Troy, you were too, so don't be laughing.
No, not exactly a break dancer,
Okay.
but a little bit of DJing when I was in high school, and that was something that was really popular at that time. And it was, I grew up at the very beginnings of this cultural evolution that is now evolved into something that I think when we were doing those basement parties, I would probably be doing something else if I knew how big this was going to be. But, it was a hobby and something that I thoroughly enjoyed. But it was, that's how things start. They start with an idea. They start with some energy and enthusiasm, and it's no telling where it can take you. And so hats off to Troy. We always have our little battles of, who's in your top 10 rappers kind of thing.
All right,
every time
who's your top?
No, well, for me, I'm a Wu-Tang fan.
All right.
So Wu-Tang forever.
We like we love that. We love that. All right, transportation is a part of your family legacy. Your father worked in transportation.
Yes, so the original Nat Ford, the Mr. Ford, was the chief operating officer for New York City Transit, where he was responsible for about 30,000, 40,000 employees before he retired. And, he was part of that migration from the South. He and my mother met, and they moved to New York. And he actually started out as a track worker. And through hard work and dedication, was able to elevate himself to that level of position in transportation in this nation, moving millions of people on a daily basis. And my three younger sisters and I, quite often, our duty was to answer the phone, and it would be, this is the New York City Command Center looking for Mr. Nat Ford, and that, that's part of that foundation of who I am today. And, it's a 24-hour system, 7 days a week, and so phone calls at any time of the day, any day of the week, and he was expected to respond and lean in with his talent and oversight and expertise. So that's kind of my early beginnings in this industry, and I got a chance to follow in his footsteps.
Wow. And then where from there, say after high school?
So for me, after high school, I took two different tracks. I took a track which started out with going to college, and at a very young age, I started college when I was 17, and still had a little bit of immaturity. And so Dad said, "Okay, you're going to work and go to school at the same time." And came back home, started working, and lo and behold, started with New York City Transit. And I just got bit by the bug. I started out as a train conductor, and interestingly enough, day one, I'm out in the Rockaways. How many of you are familiar with the Far Rockaways in New York? Anybody? Well, it could be very cold and very rainy, and this was probably my day one. And I'm like, what the hell did I do? You know what I mean? Come on, Dad, this ain't for me. But, you leave Far Rockaways, you go into Brooklyn, and this is like 6, 7 o'clock, maybe even earlier, 5 o'clock in the morning, sun is just starting to come up, it's freezing, it's raining, that kind of thing. And as the train was progressing, I saw people who didn't have a home on the train. I saw firefighters on the train, nurses on the train. I then started seeing people who wanted to go to Wall Street with briefcases on, and I got hooked by it.
Wow.
The whole passion and just enthusiasm around I'm moving people. I'm helping all of these people achieve their dreams. The dream of an education, dream of a job, the dream of great health care. And being part of that, I got bit by that bug, and it's all history now. Here I am.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that dream has taken you, again, as you heard at the beginning of our conversation, has taken you to the largest metro areas in the United States, including San Francisco and Atlanta. What were some of the lessons that you picked up from there? What were some of the things that you will always take with you?
I'd say the turning point for me. So technically, coming out of New York City, clearly understood how to run transit, right? How to move people around from a technical standpoint. Fast forward, when I got to Atlanta as a young executive, I had a board of directors that was made of heavy hitters in the civil rights movement. So Dr. Joseph Lowery was chair of the board. Juanita Abernathy, who was the wife of the late Reverend Dr. Ralph David Abernathy, they were my board of directors.
Wow.
And on the board of directors. And it was very interesting as a young executive who thought he knew everything about transportation from a very technical standpoint, right? Schedules, budgets, operations, things of that nature, to hear them talk about why transportation was so important and key to the success of the community of Atlanta. And the MARTA system, if you do your history on the MARTA system, a great deal of the work that was done in building the MARTA system was based on DeKalb, Fulton, and City of Atlanta that paid a 1 penny sales tax to build one of the largest rapid rail systems in the country. Why? To provide accessibility to its residents, and thereby allow them to, again, achieve their dreams, whatever that may be, of good health care, education, job opportunities, and be able to do that rapidly in Atlanta. And to sit there and have them talk about transportation from that more philosophical and higher level perspective, the light bulb went off in me. And in terms of, ever since then, I don't talk about budgets and projects without talking about what does it mean to people in a community. So you'll hear us talk about, well, this project and this innovation or this budget issue or something like that. But at the end, what does it mean for people? And I think that's what you may hear me inside the JTA talk to our staff about in terms of the decisions that we make. Let's start first with the people and then be creative in finding the solution that takes care of the budget, takes care of the project and all of the headwinds you may face in trying to develop a system. So that was the seminal moment for me as a young professional. Then going to San Francisco, that's a whole different part of the world, in terms of transportation. In San Francisco, in addition to the public transportation responsibilities, we also were responsible for all of the mobility in the city, whether you're walking, biking, traffic management, parking, things of that nature, and then eventually taxis. Very interesting in that we didn't just look at one mode versus another. And when I mean by mode, we looked at the entire spectrum of mobility. Whether you walked, biked, rode public transportation, or drove a car, we made comprehensive and holistic decisions. Because at any given moment, you may be walking, you may be biking, for some particular reason, you may need to use transit, or you may be driving. And so that was very, very innovative that the citizens of San Francisco said it should be under one umbrella. So you don't have these different modes competing against each other. And frankly, people get killed and they get hurt in terms of that activity. And then finally, I don't want to say reluctantly, but finally, we took the taxi industry into the SFMTA, not soon enough, though. Part of our taking them in and adding them to our portfolio was we wanted to upgrade taxis. For far too long, taxis, dirty, not where you need them to be. At that time, they wouldn't take a credit card swipe and things of that nature. So we really wanted to upgrade their technology. When we finally brought them in, and they fought us tooth and nail. I mean, the protests are a lot different in San Francisco. They literally, every time we had a board meeting at City Hall, they would circle the block, honking their horns, the taxi drivers, because they really didn't like that we were bringing them in and wanted to modernize them. Well, finally, when we brought them in, there were emails that were showing up that I thought were spam emails saying, come see the newest innovation in transportation in San Francisco. Come to the Hyatt Hotel after 5 o'clock, wine and cheese, and hear about this new innovation. Anybody in the room can guess what that innovation was? It was Uber. I heard somebody say it. It was Uber. And I got a front row seat to that. And what I saw was that those of us who are not willing to entertain technology, you will fall by the wayside. And right now, you go out here, you're not going to see a taxi, right? So the thing is, we have to find ways to be comfortable with embracing doing things differently, leveraging new technologies, because what I've been told by the technologists I talk to, technology always wins. In the end, you can fight it, you could push back against it, you could legislate against it, but eventually technology will win because it makes our lives better and more accessible in our particular case with Uber. So I should have bought stock, I should have went to those wine and cheese things they had at the hotels. I might have been part of the beginning. But then I wouldn't be sitting here with you. So, but
and for those of us who went to the Gen W conference,
yes.
If that was you, that's exactly what we heard. If you can get left behind,
you get left behind
if you don't embrace it. So, how did you change that mindset? You talked about the elderly woman when you were here, your first visits to Jacksonville, and seeing that pole stuck in the ground and the cart, flipped over, and maybe her leaning against it in warm weather. How do you change a mindset when you come from these larger cities? Because I'm sure there have been other professionals lots of professionals, let's just be honest, who give Jacksonville a second thought because are we as progressive? How do you change that?
I think it was pretty good timing. I think that when I arrived in December 2012, at the same time, a couple of months later, Andre Wallace came to Jacksonville. So there were a number of us that were quiet support systems for each other. So we came here to this city. We looked around. We were like, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful blank canvas. And in my case, having worked all these other cities, you just saw so much potential and so much opportunity in this community. And I think having your heart in the right place, which is to serve people, and seeing the opportunities to think about things differently and do some things in a different way. One thing I learned along the way is you have to respect the culture and the people who are already there in the community. No matter how great your idea may be, you really have to kind of spend time listening to people and learning. And that was another lesson I think I got along the way with my career. And so I spent a number of months really sitting down, talking with the employees. Why do we do things the way we're doing it? Why haven't we made any changes? Looking at the business community, the religious communities. For months, there were visits with pastors and things of that nature to really get an understanding of what were some of the impediments and what were some of the opportunities. I worked for a very good board of directors that I think knew what they were getting when they hired me. I've never been one to just be status quo and just be a maintainer. And so a few months after I arrived, we started looking at how we could improve the system. And it was a little too far gone in terms of what needed to be done. It would take too long to upgrade it. And we did something that had never been done in the history of public transportation, which was the Route Optimization Initiative. And some of you may recall, it was quite some time ago, it was about 10 years ago, where we totally wiped out the existing route structure and system that had been the same one for over 30 years. And, you know, over that 30-year period, people changed where they live, where they work, where they play. And so we did something that had never been done before in public transportation, which is sunsetting one system. I remember it was a Sunday night. Jaguars just finished playing. And then the next morning, we uplifted a newer system with, frankly, remember that lady, she also, I had at least a 1-hour business lunch, right? She was still there. One of the things that we recognized is we needed to increase the frequency of the buses. And so it's great to be spread like peanut butter all throughout Duval County, but if you're making it miserable for where there's concentrations of people who are going from point A to point B, you're not serving them in a very efficient manner. So we restructured the routes. Probably 10 years ago that we did that, and it's about time for us to take another look at a major overhaul of our route structure because of the population that has moved and relocated here to Jacksonville. I was fortunate in terms of the number of individuals who wanted to remain with the JTA that were open to doing changes. And at the same time, some folks basically said, look, just let me out the door. I've been here 30-something years. I'm ready to retire. And we made it respectful for them to move on with their careers. Some of them are still fans of the JTA, but they knew that the 30-year-old system that they had grown up in had lost its effectiveness. So I was able to put together a team of individuals that had seen other things. I think that was the biggest difference. Jacksonville, we can't live in a bubble. We've got to look at what other cities are doing, other communities are doing, and not just in the United States, but around the world. What are people doing in our space of practice that could then be brought to this community? And with the right communication and education strategy, you're able to make those changes. But it was bold, I'd have to say that. And a number of transit systems around the country now, even 10 years later, are calling us to say, how did you do that? How did you change all of your routes, the frequency of service, your schedules, all at one time? But it was a bold move, and what was most important, it showed our organization and our employees that they could win, that we're a winning team because we did something that had never been done before. And frankly, there were a lot of folks who came to me later on, elected officials, and said, we thought that was going to be your swan song.
Now that's one win. That's one win, Mr. Ford.
I know, but I think that's the one that kind of kicked it. After that, everything was like, okay, rinse and repeat, because you create a culture of winning.
Can I mention this win? This is one that I think doesn't get as much attention that I think that it should. Now, a program that you brought from Atlanta to Jacksonville that I find fascinating is transit-oriented developments, or TODs. You all really need to look more into this. Now, this, whether Jacksonville residents realize it or not, it's changing the landscape of our city. And so, live, work, and play is what this is. And can you explain what transit-oriented developments are? And because it's sprinkled all over our city, and it's property that the Jacksonville Transportation Authority owns, and it's doing something with it.
Yes. So transit-oriented development is where you're literally taking property that you own as a transportation agency and partnering with the real estate developers in your community to develop multifamily, high-density housing right adjacent to public transportation. What it does is it really helps us with our efficiency. It creates revenue for us. In our case, with the Artia development right over there on the South Bank, it's a 99-year lease where we're going to get reoccurring revenues every year for the JTA, takes pressure off of the other funding that we receive, brings more revenue into the JTA to continue with our mission. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, rather than spreading like peanut butter all our transit services, so you have, a bus every 90 minutes or a bus every hour, and I check the box and say, oh yeah, I have a bus route that's on that corridor, but you got to wait an hour and a half. That's not the best way to do mass transit or public transportation. So what we do with TOD is we create density. We create density, particularly around our transit nodes. The Skyway stops are perfect examples of that. So imagine if the Skyway stops, or the Skyway was fully built out to its 10 miles, and that there was land use encouragement and design that encouraged density at each one of those stops. I don't think we would be talking about nobody rides the Skyway. And so this was something that I started back in Atlanta. When we built the rail system in Atlanta, we ended up with large parcels in and around each one of those subway rail stops. And so we petitioned the federal government to hold on to those stops and develop in and around those stops to create the density that then fed the rail system, right? So people are going to ride the rail system because the stop is right outside their door and they don't have to get in a car and then drive to a rail stop. It's right there. And so that has been something that's been in place. And you look at any Toronto, New York, or Philadelphia, some of those major cities, the highest valued property are right next to one of the rail stations. And so it's right, so again, laying out a practice that has been in place for some decades in other cities, but bringing that to Jacksonville as a strategy to make our transit system more efficient going into the future.
And Artia actually is right across the river, if you've not seen it, adjacent to the school board building. And
the Kings Avenue Skyway stop.
Right, and that's where the Four Seasons will be built.
Yeah.
And Toll Brothers has I went over. I had to see what it looked like on the inside.
Yeah,
Toll Brothers
beautiful.
has
Yeah.
built some townhouses there, and they're starting at $750.
Yeah,
And I
you
said,
can see them right out the window
what's it look
here.
like
Yeah.
in there for $750? I went in there, I was like, this is nice. This is real nice in my
That's
Tiffany Haddish voice.
Yes.
It's gorgeous. And to be able to take the river taxi
Oh yeah,
over
you have choices.
to a game.
That's right.
It's
Well,
very nice.
and the thing about it is what's really interesting, we have a number of developers in this community that the light bulb has gone off with.
Yeah.
So we're right now in discussions for a TOD right by the Rosa Parks station and another one over by the Kings Avenue garage. So we have developers who have kind of tapped into this new way of thinking boldly with their money, frankly. They're putting their money in on these developments to look at doing things differently and recognizing we're getting a significant growth in population in Jacksonville. We got plenty of land. They could live anywhere in the community, but if it's up to the JTA, we would like to concentrate them around transportation infrastructure.
Can I